The team, actually. Could we put that one up? Oh, will it work? Yay! That's us in Glasgow Airport. Still got our winter clothes on. It was January. And Jill and Margot, who were on the team, are here to tell us about Big Life, and then about Free Set, and then about their reflections and transformations of that. And then I'm going to just share for a few minutes from Scripture. And we'll finish off with a BMS resource, a reflection about India as our final prayer. And I'm going to light if I remember, I'm going to light the smelly, what do we call these? Incense sticks. And if you want to do something a little bit more active, you can come and make your mark as we think about punching the lights in darkness. So I want to invite Jill up first, and she'll tell us about Big Life. Well, we can talk about any of them, really. So go, Jill.
Hi. My name's Jill. I need a mic, don't I? Right. I'm going to talk about Big Life that Judy's already talked about. Oh, it's good because you get this. Now, on this picture you can see Ben and his wife Jill and their daughter Abigail. Get the slide up. Yeah, now that's Ben and Jill and Abigail. And he runs Big Life. And he met us at the airport, and he is totally charismatic and wild and mad and all that sort of stuff. But he runs Big Life, which is a great ministry out in India, and he does evangelism to the villages out in near Calcutta. And if you show the next slide, this is us out in the villages. One of those pictures at the top right-hand corner is the boat. Now, BMS in Scotland paid for the boat. Or BU and BMS in Scotland paid for the boat. And some of the villages that they go to are so remote, you have to get there by boat. So we went to 2 villages by boat. And the picture on the left-hand side is of the villages. The village life is very interesting. We got involved in helping with the pharmacy and involved in playing games, because what they do is they play games with the children and get them involved, and that's me in the bottom right giving out prizes, because they play games and then they give prizes for the people who come first. Lovely games that probably the children now here probably wouldn't play, because they probably think it's, like biscuits on a bit of string, where you go up and you grab a biscuit with a bit of string, and they loved it. And running and getting potatoes and putting them in their mouths and running back, and all those sorts of games. They loved it. And what they do is they go to these villages and do that, and then they show the Jesus film, and they have people in charge of the villages, and they do that. And then people become, it's a long story, but people become Christians, and then they have lots of remote communities, churches. Now, every so often, they put the churches together, and they invite them to come together. And the next slide, what they do is every 4 weeks or so, they get everybody together locally. And this picture here is, we went to a church with them, and this is all the people outside. They love having their photograph taken, and we had our picture taken with them outside. And they do that to get everybody together, and they praise and worship just as we've done tonight, and they talk. Now, obviously, they do not speak our language, not many of them, and we don't speak their language, but it's surprising what you can do with a bit of sign language. Because if you show the next slide, what Jill does in particular is that she helps with the ladies. And a lot of these villages have women involved, because that's their ministry and that's their work. And she got all the women together in the BMS guest house, which is where we were staying in Calcutta. And we had a training day, and we helped with that. Now, we did have a translator for part of it when we were talking. But this is lovely. This picture here is, we did the parable about forgiveness, and we asked them to act out a world without forgiveness and a world with forgiveness. and this is what they acted out. So you didn't need language or anything for that because it was just acted out in front of us, and that was lovely. The other thing that we did on that training day, and I have it with me, is we gave them each one of these pots. Now they're clay pots, and because we talked about, I've got it written down, on the other side of my bit of paper. We talked about the jars of clay in 2 Corinthians 4, verses 7 to 12. And what we got them to do in their groups, we asked them to write down in a flame the characteristics of each of the people there, and then everybody had a pot, and all these flames were put in the pot. Now, I've got those flames at home that people did for me, but this is the pot, and every time I look at the pot, it's on my table at home, I think of that day that we had with the women and the training that we gave them and the things that we did. We also did the umbrella, which you'll see later. And these women are great, and as I say, although we don't speak the language, you can do an awful lot with sign language. You know, encouraging them encouraging us. In fact, I think we got more from it than they did, actually, doing it. But we did an awful lot of stuff with them, parables and drama and things like that, as well as a talk which was translated. And that's Big Life, and that is a great ministry. And when we left, they gave us each one of these mugs. Aren't they good? And I also have this at home in my mug cupboard, and every time I look at the mug, I think of Big Life in the ministry and can pray for them. So that's a good prop as well. I like, as you'll hear later, I like physical things to look at and see. Thank you. And Margaret's going to talk about the other ministry we saw.
Thank you. If we could just move on to the next slide. And I'm really privileged to be able to tell you about the Free Set Ministry in Calcutta. This is Annie Hilton, and she and her husband founded the ministry in Sonagachi in Calcutta. And we'll just show a little clip, a little video clip, which will give you a little bit of context, and then I'll tell you a little bit more after the clip. Thanks. Oh, it's a really inspiring story, isn't it? It's quite an incredible place to go and visit, because when we went into the biggest red light area in India, Sonagachi, which is really hard actually to kind of describe to you the kind of what that is like, the contrast to kind of what we're used to in this country, and just the filth and the environment is very oppressive. And there's Kerry and Annie and her husband Kerry from New Zealand, who's on the next slide. There he is there. He is a Baptist minister and was a minister in New Zealand and very happily living there with their 4 children, when suddenly a leaflet came through the door and he saw Calcutta. And he just said it was a God thing. He just thought, I think this is where God is leading us next. And he said to his wife, Annie, I think God might be calling us to leave New Zealand and go to Calcutta. And her first reaction was, oh no, please, not Calcutta. Because she had actually lived her parents were missionaries in India. She knew what Calcutta was like. But they went over there, and they were led to this area, and they felt very strongly this is where God wanted them to be. They set up the business, the Free Set business, and really it is a remarkable story of how God has brought incredible light into a very dark place. As you could see the faces of the women there in that clip, and how their lives have been really transformed due to being part of that Free Set community. The story continues because one of the girls that started originally in the factory is a woman called Condola, and she lives in a place called Murshidabad, which is about 200 miles away from Calcutta in a little village. And we kind of retraced her steps, but in the opposite direction. We went, if we go on to the next slide, we went on a train up to Murshidabad to look to visit the village that she had come from and to see the next part of the journey, if you like, the Free Set journey. Kerry and Annie were really challenged when one of the ladies, when Kandula had, she herself had been sent down into Calcutta, sold by her mother, aged 13, really because of great poverty had driven her to sell her oldest daughter so that the rest of the family would be able to survive. So Kandula had gone down to Calcutta to the red light area and had been working in the factory, and she takes part in the business. And her parents had subsequently died, and she had been left her house, a little house in the village. And she'd said to Annie and Kerry, you know, I really want to give this back to you. I want to give the house, my inheritance, over to you, because I just feel that if we could give business and employment to the women of my village before they're sold down to Calcutta, then we will be providing freedom at source. So Annie and Kerry thought, yes, that's right. So we were incredibly privileged to be able to stand at Kandola's house, and just that sense of the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, of her just sort of saying, this is what God has given me, so I want to give this back. In the very little that she had, she was prepared to give it back so that other people would gain and benefit from it. So we went to look at the next bit, which is Annie and Kerry are setting up what they call the Business Incubation Unit, which is to teach the women up in that area how to weave silk scarves. And this is one of the prototype scarves that they're going to be selling. This is as well as making bags, they're now going to be weaving these scarves to sell and develop the business. So we saw the Business Incubation Unit basically as a field. It was a field that hadn't been built yet, but Judy was saying that it is now up and running, it's now being built, and they'll be having their first intake of women to teach them basic skills in the next few months. So that is a project that BMS is supporting, which is an absolutely fantastic project. We also visited some Pastor Bashir and his wife when we looked at some of the church planting that's happening there. And Pastor Bashir he's got a Muslim name. He changed his name because originally he was a Hindu, but he felt very strongly that God was calling him and his wife to reach out to the Muslim community. So he has different services, one to the Hindu population, one to the Muslim population, and we joined him in the church on one Sunday that we were there, and it was fantastic to be there and to see how God is breaking into communities and changing the lives of women, men and women and families in these rural parts of India. So going back to Free Set again, just on the next slide there, you can see that when you visit the factory, what is in the very middle of the factory is the cross. The cross stands in the middle. And when we were there and we sang about love coming down, we sang about grace and mercy. And when we were there with Annie and she took us out walking around the area, and she was just telling us a little bit about how the factory works. And that this girl came into the factory. And Annie just greeted her like a long-lost friend and welcomed her back into the factory. And this had been a girl that had come and she'd been working in the factory, and she had gone back to living her life on the line, a life of prostitution. And Annie hadn't seen her for a couple of years, and she'd come back. And just the way that Annie had greeted that woman as she came out, this beautiful girl, she just had decided it was time to come back. That is an image that will remain with me always. just that sense of there's always a welcome back in God's family. There's never a sense of now you've gone and made a dreadful mistake, you can never come back. But there's always a welcome, there's always grace, there's always mercy. And when we had come back from that walk round the streets of Sonagachi and we came back to the cross, we were so grateful to be able to come back and to sit at the foot of the cross and to pray for the work that is going on there, because it is truly profound how God is changing the lives of those women. And they're staying in the community because they want to stay and they want to make a difference. They don't feel that they should move out because that's where they live and that's where they feel that they should minister to the other people who live there.
Hi. I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about the impact on me of going. I was unsure before I went, like a lot of us, about what it would be like. You know, what was in store for us. As you can see, I'm not young. A lot of these trips are for young people, and this was not, but what can I do? I can't go sort of building churches or houses or whatever. But actually, it was a life-changing experience for me. I like to see things in pictures. I know you've seen a lot of pictures tonight, but I like to actually see the people and the experiences and things like that. Now, you can go and buy things. As you can see, I've got one of the free set scarves. I've got one of the free set bags as well. You can buy things, but you can do more than that. As well as praying, you can go and see, and they are really doing life-changing work. And the work of Big Life is life-changing too. And that was a real good eye-opener for me about what can be achieved in these countries and what God is doing in these countries. Because sometimes you just sit back and think it's all happening here, or I have a very narrow view of maybe the world, but actually it was a real good eye-opener for me about what God is doing in other places. And I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you're kind of not quite sure the impact it's going to have on you. And coming back, I remember I was walking down round by where I live, and I was thinking, God, why did I go to the biggest red light area of the world, the biggest area in the world for human trafficking? And actually, once you see something, you kind of can't unsee it. And once you hear the stories, you can't undo that. That is going to be and remain with me now for the rest of my life. And the challenge for me is thinking, well, what difference does it make for me? I think one of the things that I was deeply challenged about as I said to you about the Free Set Factory, was the fact that I remember our minister Alistair once saying about church should be radical at the centre and inclusive at the edges. And I thought that was just a fantastic picture. I thought, that is Free Set. It is completely radical at the centre. The cross is 100% at the centre. But there's no coercion. There's no kind of you must believe what I believe to work here. Because it's about love and it's about reaching out to the community. It's about freedom, it's about choice, it's about helping women to really take control of their lives. And I think it's very, very inspiring and it's very challenging. I went to speak to the women in Cornton Vale about what we'd been doing, the women's prison in Stirling, and I was telling them about the story of Free Set. And for many of them who have experienced themselves trafficking and the whole world of prostitution, one of them turned to me and said, well, what about Scotland? Why can we not have something like that in Scotland? And I think, well, she's right. We've got lots of issues on our doorstep, and it's been challenging for me because it's opened my eyes, and where it's taking me on my journey, I'm not entirely sure. But I'll let you know. I'll let you know. But it's still something that I'm kind of working through. But we were deeply privileged to be able to go and take part.
Thanks to Jill and Margot for sharing, because of course going is great. It's a wonderful experience. But it's about our transformation more than anything. And thank you for sharing a little bit of where you are in your ongoing transformation. It was an exciting thing for me to see the folks in the teams be stretched by God, be fully reliant on God, and to take risks in sharing and participating in services and so on. And that's something we've continued to talk about as we've come back and we've shared with churches. And for me, I have to process what I saw too. And Margot's comment from the lady in Cornton about what do we do about the issues here in Scotland is kind of an issue for me. And what do we do about trafficking globally? As I said, we heard in the news, I think it's 19,000 people in the UK are trafficked. And what do we do about that? And I can't see a solution. I can't find a solution in my head. I'm a bit of a problem solver, and I can't find a solution. And so I was talking to God about it, and what came to mind was the story of David and the giant, or David and Goliath. You know, you have the 12-foot giant with his heavy armour that scared all of the Jewish troops, or the Israel soldiers. They didn't want to go up and fight with him. Well, you wouldn't really, would you? He was totally scary. And the person that eventually felled him was David, 17-year-old shepherd, who did what he had been doing every day or every week for years. He was a shepherd. He'd been practicing with his sling and the stones. I think he was very well practiced. He was very good at what he did. He simply did what he was good at and got the giant in the centre of his head and felled him. And we know this story. We hear a lot about it. But the key thing is that God was with David and God enabled him to bring the giant down. And for me, trafficking is a giant. And I felt God was saying, we need to do what we can do, what we're skilled at here at home. And with God, we can fell this giant of trafficking. With God, we can bring down the issues that blight our families and our communities. And so the challenge for each one of us, the challenge for me is, what are the things I'm gifted at? What are the skills and the experience that God has given me that I can use in serving others and enabling them to come to a place of freedom here in the UK? And we're going to finish off with a 4-minute reflection, which is pictures of India with some prayer points and some music. But we've got this umbrella with us, which you're probably wondering why we have a folding cheap umbrella. But we used it on the Ladies' Day to encourage and to inspire them that just who they are, taking God's Holy Spirit with them back to the villages, they were punching holes in the darkness. They were bringing light into the darkness. And the joss sticks burn a hole in the umbrella. So I'd like to offer you an opportunity to come forward, just at your own time, and use a joss stick to make a hole in the darkness. Because one hole doesn't make a huge difference. But there's about 50 of us here tonight or so. But 50 holes, that makes a huge difference. Makes a big light in the darkness. So we'll make sure it's health and safety safe. But we're going to do the reflection now, and that'll run for a few minutes. So just come forward and make a hole. We'll show you what it looks like at the end, and just do a benediction to close off. Does that sound okay?